Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks to Meg and to Mark for inviting me to be on this panel. And thanks to my co-panelists. I want to give, I guess what I'm going to speak to briefly is about why I think the passion that I've heard in this room for the city of Vancouver and for the region in which it sits is key to the reason why I do have hope for sustainability in the city. But before I do that, I want to give you a caveat because I'm one of the lesser known entities maybe in the room. And it's that, like many of you, I believed in the prospect for cities as a place to study in the environment and to study sustainable development before it was fashionable. I studied the rise of environmental sustainability policy in the 1990s in British Columbia as an undergraduate through initiatives that I'm humbled to be saying to people like Mike Harcourt, who designed them, like the Commission on Resources and the Environment, the Land and Resources Management Process, and the Clayoquot Sound protests. And those were formative for me, but they also were part of what drove me to a very different city in order to further my studies in sustainability, and that for me was New York City. And that was at a time when poor graduate students could still afford to live in Lower Manhattan, when opting to cycle on the streets meant you probably did have a death threat and people would shout that to you through their car doors. And when even trying to approach the concrete mess of what is now the Highline Park could get you arrested on a wide variety of suspicions. So this background is just to say that you have every right to be suspicious of me at the start for a pro-urban bias, particularly in the context of my co-panelists here. But what I want to make absolutely clear is that I'm not going to pitch to you a vision of Vancouver as a sustainable utopia. I don't think that Vancouver or Amsterdam or Berlin are the solution to the problem that we have with limits or the problems that we have in dealing with more than human nature. At the same time, I don't think that that old saw about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic applies to urban sustainability work here or elsewhere. The case I'd like to make is that for a civilization in decline, as ours is, our cities offer us more opportunity to learn from our mistakes. And I think that that is about as much as we can hope for, and I don't think it is as pessimistic a thing to think as it may sound at first blush. So how can I say this? I'm going to borrow a framework from a brilliant political strategist from the United States of the one generation ago, named Albert O. Hirschman, who offered a brilliant framework in 3 simple words: exit, voice, and loyalty. And what he was trying to describe was how organizations in decline can learn from what's going on. So you have 2 opportunities when you see your organization in decline. One is exit, so you vote with your feet, you get the hell out of Dodge when the going gets tough. And voice, lodging a complaint, lobbying and organizing for change, speaking to management, are legitimate ways in which members of an organization can take action when the organization is in decline. But if you care about the organization, you want more people to use the power of voice than the power of exit. And this is because when people leave an organization, without first saying why they're going, the organization loses important and timely information it could use to improve, right? And over time, this becomes a compounding problem, as the only people left to speak for the organization in decline are those who weren't able to recognize the decline in its earlier stages or who didn't care enough about the decline to leave. And it turns out that a move from exercising exit to exercising voice is also a move toward local democracy, which is important, particularly when the organization in question is a city or a region that you care about because it's the city or region in which you live. So it pains me to refer to Vancouver as a city or a city region in decline, and I know that it will raise the ire of many of you in the audience who have spent tireless hours and valiant careers building it into the successful stages that it has gone forward. But I also don't think that it's a new idea after having listened to the presentations from other panelists throughout the day. How is Vancouver in decline? Well, it's experiencing declines in equity. We have declining affordability, which means declines in the hospitableness of the place that Matt was referring to earlier and this morning. And it's, I believe, also declining in the uniqueness of the sustainable and the Vancouverist model that we heard from Anne and colleagues earlier today too. Which means we're also finding it as a region in decline in terms of the window of opportunity for change. And that also goes, of course, for the reasons that Bill and my other colleagues on this panel have presented. So, taking this city region as an organization in decline, I do believe that we can say that we're seeing a shift from exit to voice, although it's a qualified one. But it is nonetheless a significant trend. And it's certainly the opposite from the trend that we see in a larger scaled organization of which we are all a part too, the Government of Canada. There we can clearly trace, and I don't have to go through all of the arguments about this because other speakers earlier in the day have laid out the grave reasons for concern about the Government of Canada. But let's talk first about exit. So what I would put to you that we're seeing is a move towards not seeing the possibility of exit from the city of Vancouver, not seeing the possibility of exit from urbanization within this region. And this goes along with arguments about the urbanization of the suburbs. All municipalities, with the exception of one in this region, are now building more multifamily dwellings than single-family homes. We don't see the sort of the clash between the suburbanites and the urbanites in the Vancouver region as we see in many other urban regions around the world. In fact, we're seeing more reasons for working together amongst the advocates for high density development and the advocates for farmland protection against suburbanization in our agricultural land reserve. So there is a growing recognition, I think, that there's no way out of urbanization. And we are coming to see ourselves as an urban region and the best one that we're likely to get. And this is definitely a shift from what cities experienced, particularly in the United States in the 1970s when there was mass exodus. People with incomes and with the opportunity and the possibility to leave, they left in droves. And many American cities have never recovered from that. I would say, however, that we are, as a city region, nonetheless being exited, and this goes along with what Bill was referring to as the increasing use of our region as a flow-through for fossil fuels, and by the retraction of the central government from feeling a need to even include us in decision-making with regard to how resources are being transported through our region. So then if we talk about voice, what evidence do we have that we are seeing an increased use of voice in order to save our city region in decline? Well, we are seeing, and Jenny's presentation did a beautiful job of presenting some of the seriousness, and Anne McAfee's earlier too, with which the City of Vancouver and the Metro Vancouver region has come to take public participation. There are problems with that, and it is more often than not, more of a public relations cacophonous exercise than a sort of a deliberative dialogical process. We do have many languages speaking past one another at once. However, even outside of formal government processes for public participation, we're also seeing more citizen-based mobilization. We don't agree with all of those mobilizations, but to see thousands of people coming out to public hearings in the township of Langley about a development proposal is nonetheless a striking display of voice. And I include in the idea of voice also the formation of new partnerships, new ways that the city of Vancouver in particular, and as Jenny was referring to the region also, has developed of working with non-government partners, with citizen groups, with BC Hydro, with non-government groups, with the private sector organizations, in sort of coming to a more mature understanding that if we're going to do this, we're probably going to do this alone. One example of this would be the $2 million Greenest City Fund that was funded by the Vancouver Foundation and is administered by the City of Vancouver in order to support neighborhood and individual small grants in order to increase the individual and the small group's role in implementing Greenest City initiatives. And it's not a perfect process. I'm not about to stand here and say that we're moving towards an ideally deliberative region. There are clearly deleterious power struggles going on between local governments and the regional government in land use planning in particular, but it's a trend. So one final thought about the notion of loyalty that I haven't said too much about, and that's the third element in Hirschman's trifecta. What he says is that people's use of exit compared to voice depends a lot on loyalty. It's sort of an interfering variable based on people's sense of attachment to the organization. So it can provide wrong information about how to act, and it can also lead people to keep their mouths shut and continue doing what they were doing instead of acting when they should have. And I think that loyalty is really the key one to consider. And the question is, to what version of Vancouverism, to what version of Vancouver are we loyal? So are we loyal to the Vancouver, which is the integrative kind of thinking organism that gave us a livable region strategic plan, which integrates transportation, land use planning, integrates a polycentric region, integrates green space protection? Or are we more interested and more loyal to an idea of Vancouver that is represented by the kind of piecemeal thinking that gave us eco-density and Vancouver green capital? Are we loyal to the equity-based thinking that Nathan so brilliantly presented earlier, that gave us the City of Vancouver at least able to articulate a vision of revitalization without displacement, inclusionary zoning, and at least not prohibiting a vital and subsistence economy street market in Pigeon Park? Or are we more interested in a Vancouver that vaunts its performance on international green and livable city ranking lists and brand-conscious photo ops like images of white men in suits on bicycles? I think that a lot hinges on what piece of Vancouver's vision of sustainability we're loyal to, and on how we can build our voice in order to recognize that this city is in decline and that we need to act together in order to prevent further decline. Thank you.